Good afternoon again, everyone. Thrilled once again welcome you to CAGFO, the Canadian Association of Government Finance Officers weekly Wednesday webinar. Today we're joined by good friends from Questica, Charlie, Doug, and Michael, to talk about some very timely matters around budgeting in this strange time we find ourselves in. So with that, I should point out that we have questions available to you. You can use the questions tab in the control panel at any time, and we will be interjecting and hopefully trying to answer the questions that you have as we weave our way through today's discussion. Over to you, Charlie and Mike.
Well, thank you, Lee. Thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you for the invitation to speak to your membership today. I feel so privileged to be here. And hello, women and men of the Canadian Association of Government Financial Officers. My name is Charlie Francis. I'm a senior consultant with Questica, and Questica was founded in 1998. It's a Canadian company, and they only partner with public sector organizations, local governments like all of you on this call today. And they partner with them to better enable data-driven budgeting and decision-making while increasing data accuracy, productivity, and just improving stakeholder trust. And that's why I work with them. My name is Charlie Francis. I'm a senior consultant. I'm a retired municipal finance director. I worked in the business for over 45 years as a chief financial officer, mostly in California cities, some in California and Florida, and also for housing authorities. And after I retired, I started, and I was always an early adopter of technology. So, and because it brought productivity, it brought efficiency, effectiveness, it allowed me to be more strategic in my financial management, which is what this webinar is really about, strategic financial management. So today I work with GovTech companies to help them develop effective, efficient, and strategic software to help us do strategic financial management. My wife and I live in Eagan, Minnesota, and I'm also a planning commissioner. So let me ask Doug to introduce himself first, one of my co-panelists. Doug?
Hi, I'm Doug Fletcher. I'm a project manager for Questica. I am a second generation budget software provider with over 10 years of experience delivering budget tools to public and quasi-public sector entities. I've completed more than 25 budget software implementations, mostly for cities and counties in the United States. Most recently, I implemented Questica Budget for the city of Seattle, Washington. My wife and I live in Portland, Oregon, where I enjoy rock climbing in the Columbia River Gorge.
Okay, thank you, Doug. And just as a quick aside, Doug and I were chatting the other day, and we found out that I knew his father for over 40 years now, and here we are working together with his son. I'm really happy to be doing that. And Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role here today.
Sure, I'm Mike Newsom. I've been working with Questica for over 10 years now, initially as a project manager. Prior to joining Questica, I had many years in financial planning, and I was a regulator of Ontario credit unions for a number of years. I really enjoyed my time with Questica, and I look forward to many more.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Doug. And so let's move on to what our agenda is all about today. We're going to start by talking about the role of the finance director and how in today's day and age, we're no longer just preservers and reporters of value, but as CFOs of our organizations, we're really enablers and creators of values for our local governments. And we're going to talk about strategic financial planning. In other words, how we take strategic plans to budgets and then take the actual results back to strategic plans. And when we do that, we're going to be finding alignment zones, or I used to call them conflict zones, where there's areas that of non-union with the financial plan to the strategic plan to the strategic plan to community needs and expectations. And then we're going to conclude by walking through several of the processes of strategic financial management and planning. All of this in the spirit of how do you make decisions on the fly as you're going through your day-to-day activities, especially as you're facing those day-to-day activities with this COVID-19 crisis going on. So let's talk about this role as a finance director. I really enjoy these, to look at these four values that we deliver to our local governments. You know, and at the bottom of this pyramid, and probably the most important, is timely and accurate financial reporting. That's what we all learned as the central purpose of accounting. And it's essential in running our public agencies, and we'll never get away from doing that. But now and today, and especially in these times, we're expected to have an expanded role, not unlike a corporate chief financial officer. You're going to be expected during these uncertain times to participate in driving your agency towards identifying and delivering essential services with severe limitations on your revenues, right? And especially cash. During this COVID crisis, compounded even more by protests with possible violence and looting, our cash is going to be constrained. Our revenues are impacted. Our expenses are spiking. And so the CFO needs to be at the elbow of the city county manager, with the school superintendent, with the college president, ready to support and challenge her and him and leading your public agencies through this these raging storms. So, you know, I just want to emphasize that you need to be a communicator, a storyteller. You need to recommend data-driven. Let me get to the next page. Sorry about that. Data-driven and evidence-based policies and strategies and tactics to your elected officials, to your senior management team, and to get across the key information and concepts that facilitate discussion you know, so that everyone's efficient and effective. And for those of you on the call today that are not CFOs, but you're there supporting your CFO during this crisis, you need to help efficiently and effectively transform the finance, accounting, information technology, administration functions from a purely transactional and cost efficiency focus to an increasingly value-added strategic focus. So at this point, we would like to do a little poll. We're going to be interjecting 4 or 5 polls during the presentation today. And what we really want to know is, like in this poll, what is your role at the local organization that you represent? So let me go in here and launch the first poll. And if you would just click on there, whether you're a manager, a director, a CFO, analyst, accountant, or planner. And we'll give you, you know, 20 seconds or so to be able to fill out this poll before we close it. See, we have 70 attendees currently right now, and looks like we have a few more participating in the poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Poll's closed, and now I'm going to share the results. And so now we're seeing, like, we got 29% of the people on the poll are managers, directors, 13% are CFOs, 29% analysts, 26% accountant, and 3% planners. Good cross section. And so I hope we'll tailor our presentation so it meets the needs for all of you. Did I close that poll? Hide. There we go. Okay, so let's get to the very first slide. And that's, you know, strategic plans. I'd like to talk about this process of the community's needs and expectations going into a strategic plan and a 5-year plan, and how that feeds into the annual budget. But, you know, before I start, strategic plans all tend to look pretty much the same, don't they? They usually have 3 major parts. You know, the first is the vision or mission statement, and it sets out those lofty and aspirational goals. The second is a list of initiatives that the local government will carry out in pursuit of the goals. And this tends to be really organized, but also really long, right? And in fact, the list could just grow and grow and grow until it's finally ended by either you get tired of writing all the initiatives, or you just run out of affordability, both in time and resources and money. And then the third element is this conversion into financials. And what this does is then it helps dovetail the community needs and expectations into a 5-year strategic plan. 5 years kind of typical. It makes it appear strategic, but in reality, management usually only commits to 1 year, right? And in the context of 2 to 5, strategic really means impressionistic. Mike, tell me a little bit about what you're seeing from this translation of the strategic plan into the annual budget. What's that budgeting process look like? You know, it's the most important activity municipality undertakes. So what?
Absolutely. But, you know, we are seeing as time goes on here, a greater drive towards multi-year budgeting. And in fact, in some provinces, we do have organizations or municipalities who budget and are required to budget for 3 years. And some of them have taken that to the extreme of actually approving the budget for a 3-year period.
Wow.
So they have so this saves them money in terms of, you know, having to go through the process every year. They do it once every 3 years and then put in sort of supplementary sort of changes on, you know, for the other 2 years. So we are seeing that, particularly in Alberta, we're seeing a lot of that. In terms of you know, budgeting versus strategic planning, I mean, one of the things that we have in Questica Budget is the ability to carry both, you know, long-term, high-level strategic plans and shorter-term budgets within the same database, which is, you know, very helpful because we can use performance measures to basically monitor the alignment between the two. So one thing that you have to be aware of, though, is that sort of tendency for inertia to align the strategic plan with the budget rather than the other way around. Because that can happen.
That's interesting. So in order to prepare like a multi-year budget, a biennial or triennial, it sounds like you have to put strategy first then, that the funding allocation should be based on the goals and strategy plan. So the strategic plan is coming first in the effort.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, you know, and we see victims of the, you know, every day we experience victims of the opposite. You know, I think two of the major victims that we see, particularly in these days, are, you know, the general breakdown in the infrastructure, and if this is not too self-interested, care for the elderly.
That's right. Yeah, we're seeing that especially during these COVID times.
Yeah.
So disconnects can spell doom for a local government in many ways, you know, misapplied resources, inadequate results, you know, clear unaccountability and, you know, just drawn out planning cycles. So I guess the bottom line that we're trying to communicate on this slide is that when budgets aren't aligned with strategy, it's going to limit your government's ability to execute that strategy and achieve your goals. But when the budget and strategy are linked, and decision makers can see how the two impact each other, funds are allocated more effectively. Mike, I'm finding oftentimes that people say that they're linking their strategic plan to their budget, but it's kind of loose. You know, I don't think it's realistic to expect every line item on the budget to directly connect with a high level goal or objective. But I think there's ways to do that today that weren't available to us before. And software and technology is allowing us to take that extra step or two to see how a program or service links with the strategy, you know, and actually document that link.
Yeah, we certainly do that. And I know that Doug is going to be talking about those issues and ways in which that can happen a little later in this presentation.
Okay, great. Yeah. And so in summary, audience, create your strategic plan, build a mechanism for continuous feedback from appropriate stakeholders, you know, your citizens, your elected officials, your city and county managers, your staff, and then develop your local government budget based on the plan's goals or outcomes. And this is the proper order to the process and will allow you to successfully execute your strategy. Now, I want to talk about this next step, how to make the strategic process more circular. And that's in this translation of taking your annual budget into actual results. This is measuring and evaluating performance, not only in results, but your financial performance. And we need to do that to understand if our plans are working. And so what I always kind of used to do is I would, and we're going to talk about this during the webinar, of what I actually did is how to take actual results in 3 major areas. That would be like monthly budget monitoring with the fiscal impact section of staff reports that go to elected officials. And then in your policy decision making, how does that plug into your 5-year financial plan? How does it merge into your strategic plan or comport with your strategic plan? And finally, does it meet or not meet the community's needs and expectations? And then we're going to find and talk about, we can call them alignment zones. When I was a finance director, sometimes I called them conflict zones of what elected officials need to know this information, not to stop their decision making, but to inform their decision making. So I would like to turn over the next 3 slides to Doug to talk about how Questica software incorporates this into their budgeting and performance management software. Doug?
Thank you, Charlie. So here we have an example of a pretty standard strategic plan for a city. And this is a strategic scorecard shown here. This is determined before the budget planning cycle begins and is hopefully driven by citizen priorities that have been submitted through whatever citizen engagement mechanisms you have in place. So for each color here, we have the broad strategic plans, in this case, smart growth and the environment, as well as efficient government. And for each plan, we have goals to accomplish that plan. And then under each goal, we have multiple strategies that could be used to accomplish that goal. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So here within the Questica budget software, we can see the strategic plan set up within its own hierarchy. So each, it says on the screen there, strategic direction is tied to a goal. And then there's also multiple strategies under each goal here. Sorry, it looks like the GIF is not playing correctly. Oh, there we go. And here we have a user creating a new decision package for future approval by the budget office. So just a package of standard budget requests. And they tie this decision package to a general strategic goal. So once the package is created, they can go in and start adding budget lines into that package. And then when entering the budget line, they can tie each line to a specific strategy. So you can see here, they're selecting a department, an account, and they're linking this to a strategy. You'll see all of those strategies that had appeared in the hierarchy and requesting some dollars. And since we have the hierarchy set up in the back end of the database, we can default the correct goal and direction relationship for that strategy. Next slide, please.
Okay.
So here now we are looking at a screenshot of a budget versus actuals report, which is prepared as an ad hoc report in Questica Budget, where we've already tied those strategic plans to all of our budget lines within our decision packages. And we also have strategic plans tied to any actuals transactions that are coming through from the financial system into Questica. So that allows us to break down the budget not just by fund, department, or division, but also by the strategic plans. and we can quickly and easily see what proportion of the budget or current spending is actually going towards the directions that we would like them to go. If we incorporate that into a regular review on a monthly or a quarterly basis, this will allow us to ensure that all of our funds are being properly prioritized to those citizen-driven strategic directives that we initially set out from the start of that budget cycle. Thank you, Charlie. Back to you.
No, yeah, thank you, Doug. This is fantastic. Can you imagine what it was like for me to try to have to do all of this in Excel? And now it was impossible. You know, it just took a lot of work. And with technology, with your software, now we're able to do this within the system, and it makes it so important for this next step because you know, in order to ensure that it is consistent with the strategic plan and the community needs, what I used to do is take that information, the actual versus the budget information, and I would recalibrate my 5-year financial plan here. And by recalibrating it with the current year forecast becoming the new base to the 5-year plan, we're able to say, are we in alignment with between the 5-year financial plan and the strategic plan? So this recalibrated long-term financial plan, if it aligned with the strategic plan, good, you know, and I would report it so to our elected officials, to my city manager. But if it didn't align with the strategic plan, then we have a couple of options in front of us. We have to know that at some point we're going to have to renegotiate the strategic plan with the community needs and expectations, or we have to come to the conclusion that we have a broken strategic plan and we may need to then go to the next step, because a broken strategic plan will mean the second alignment zone of, is it aligned with the community needs and expectations? And even if the strategic plan is broken or it's out of alignment with the 5-year financial plan, if it still comports with the community needs and expectations, well, then we're good. Our mayor is going to get reelected. But if it doesn't align with the community needs and expectations, and now we have more, we could have an angry community. We could have unelected, newly elected officials, or we might have to even reshape the community needs and expectations. But the whole purpose of this exercise is to inform policy makers as they're making decisions so that they can be in front of meeting the community needs rather than reacting to it. Remember, the whole purpose of my strategic financial planning was to prepare responses in advance. So now we have a poll question. And the next poll is, are you aligning your strategic plans to budgets? So I'm going to open up the poll.
Charlie, before we, as you're opening up the poll, we have a question from Angie. Actually, we have a couple of questions from Angie. She asks, who decides the alignment, the user entering? And what if they're wrong? What level of understanding do they need to have in order to get it right?
Oh, wow. So I love questions like this. Thank you. Thank you, Angie, for asking that question. Yeah, and there's a quantitative and a qualitative aspect to the alignment. So the first step that I would take would say, okay, here's something that's coming out of either my monthly budget to actual monitoring. Here's an event that's coming from a policy decision that the city council is about to make, or here's an action item on the city council agenda. Maybe it's a budget supplemental appropriation. Maybe it's a new way of delivering a service. Maybe it's a new contract for software. And every staff report will have a fiscal impact section. And the result of that fiscal impact section could end up in a 5-year financial plan that is different, has different outcomes and calculations than initial. So that would be my first step, is what is the quantitative difference between the current year, the 5-year forecast recalibration. And then if it was enough to big of enough of a difference, then I would need to bring that to the attention of elected officials and my management team, so that they can then say, okay, what's the quantitative impact? Is it aligned or is it not aligned?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
actually, let me just add, because I think this whole issue is one of sort of education. How prepared are people to make the decisions, and do they have the knowledge to make these decisions? I think certainly from our standpoint, when we're budgeting in Questica budget, the workflow process allows these decisions about what strategy is in play for a particular line item. Those decisions can be made at a level above the level that in which people are actually entering the initial budget. So the answer is there can be some flexibility between who makes these decisions about what strategy is in play for a particular line item.
Yeah. Oh, great observation. Yeah. And I used to, part of who I was, my brand as a CFO to the city that I worked for, was that sooner or later, every policy decision that you make, elected officials, comes down to money. Now, I don't want you to, so sooner or later, it always comes down to money. But I don't want you to make your decision purely on the financial implications, but you should be informed of the financial implications as you're making these decisions. So, and that was very difficult to do on the fly. But with today's technology, current year budget to actuals can be quickly forecast, a new base calculated, and a recalibration of your 5-year plan can happen within minutes instead of days and weeks. And policymakers can have that information at their fingertips. Are there other questions, Lee?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. So let's launch this poll. The poll is, are you aligning your strategic plan to the budget? And are we seeing that?
I think we're seeing the results of the first poll.
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me come back here. Poll 2. Here we go. Launch. Sorry about that. And so now we're have the poll in progress, and we're starting to get some answers in of aligning strategic plans to budgets. And we have 3 choices for you to answer: a yes, no, or in consideration. And the poll will automatically close when after maybe 20 seconds or so. Right now we have 73 attendees, and we're getting some good answers in here. Let's give everyone 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll. Okay, and now I'll share the results. And we're seeing that 44% of you are aligning your strategic plans, and 35% have it in consideration. And it would have been kind of nice to have a follow-up question, but it's something to leave a thought in your mind. Was it those of you who are not aligning strategic plans to budgets, is it because you don't have a strategic plan, or is it because it's hard to do that in Excel if Excel is your budgeting system? All right, let's hide this poll, and we'll move on to the next slide. The next slide is our process. How do we go about doing this? And I would do this continually throughout the year. In other words, I would take my current year forecast, and then I would look at my current year budget monitoring, and then I would reforecast it. And what that would do is that base year then would become the tool to calibrate and re-extrapolate the 5-year financial plan. And then I would look and say, once I extrapolate that, is it consistent with what we adopted up here? Is it reasonable? If it's not, I would highlight it, that this could have an impact on our ability to meet our other strategic plan goals and objectives. And then if that occurred, then where would that align with the community needs and expectations? And I would conclude that process with a report. And the 3 major areas that I did this, as I mentioned before, was current year budget monitoring, the fiscal impact sections of staff reports, and policy making. So let's go to Mike, unless, if you want to, did you something else you want to add to this slide?
No, I think this is good. I will interject from time to time
Okay.
as we go along.
Well, then let's go to the next poll then. We would like to poll our audience today. And are you doing monthly variance reviews and reporting? So let's come over here and launch this poll. Oh, darn it. You know, I launched it and I accidentally clicked and closed it. So I don't think I can relaunch it again. So anyway, that would,
Okay.
unless, Ann, if you could set up another poll question really quick, I can come back to that. And so I'll just move on to the next slide and I'll keep monitoring.
Yeah, just give me a second, I'll get on that.
Okay. So here's the meat of it, the current year budget monitoring. And I suspect almost all of you are monitoring your budget either monthly or quarterly at the most frequency. I almost looked at it dynamically because I had software that allowed me to look at it every day. But it's so important to ensure that your financial, operational, and your capital plans that you developed and approved that came from your strategic plans, it's so important that you monitor those things. It's crucial for an organization to be able to enforce accountability related to spending and also to revenue generation. So regular comprehensive monitoring of the budget allows the government to evaluate the service level provision, to ensure any new initiatives are making expected progress towards goals and expectations, and learn more about the trends and other deviations that may affect future operations. And finally, just to demonstrate transparency by sharing findings from this regular monitoring, because from transparency comes accountability. Michael, what are you seeing with budget monitoring and when you were in your position and from our customers?
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
just to let you know, Charlie, the poll has been added, so you can go back to it anytime. Sorry, Mike, carry on.
no worries. Yeah. So we definitely are seeing a lot of monthly monitoring of budgets and reforecasting of year ends, throughout the year. I have at least 10 clients that I work with on a regular basis, municipalities who reforecast year ends, not just so they have multiple variances. They have their variance between what their approved budget was and what they're actually doing. They have variances between what they forecast the year end would look like versus what the year end looked like in the original budget. And then when they are doing this on a quarterly basis, sometimes they have variances between, what their forecast, what their year end forecast was last quarter versus what their year end forecast is this quarter, so that they can fine tune their forecasting methods as they go through the year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So when we think about what to review, I mean, it's pretty obvious that we should be reviewing our revenues. We want to pay particular attention to seasonality and volatility, trends, one-time, relationship to economic indicators. Same thing with personnel. We want to look at our personnel, our non-personnel costs, our operations, and our capital. But I also want to suggest that on our periodic monitoring, that we also look at the economic trends and our performance measures, and to try to look for those linkages between financial outcomes and strategic plan goals and objectives. And how to evaluate it is, things we need to look at. Are there some root causes that are causing deviations from budget versus actual reports? And is the time frame important for any variances that we're seeing, that kind of reflect from prior spending patterns? We also probably want to analyze in terms of, do we want to do some kind of reporting on a ad hoc basis or just on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis as well. And then again, because of the complexity of governmental fund accounting, we want to look at these variances at the fund level. Maybe that's very high level analysis. But then we get down to the department level because we want to enforce accountability with our department heads. And then we want to, I think, more particularly analyze at the sub-department and the division level, to make sure that our service levels are what was expected through the strategic plan. And lastly, we get down to the object level. I'm not concerned whether we're buying pencils or pens in office supplies. I'm more concerned about what those pencils and pens are doing in terms of meeting the strategic plan goals and objectives. So, there's tools that allow us now to conduct this analysis. And I'd sort of like then to talk about how those tools can be used within Questica's budgeting performance management and how they can be used for communications. So Doug, can you walk us through the next slide?
Sure. So here we can see the current year budget along with the tie to the strategic plan. And since we have an integration to bring in actuals transactions from the financial system on a daily basis, we can perform a real-time review of the variance. So in this example, we are doing this at the mid-year to plan for next year's budget. We can see that we're drastically under budget from what we expected. So we are not planning any changes in this spending, so we need to do some basic forecast estimating to get it back in line. So we're adding an estimate here as well as a comment about the dollars we're requesting. And since Questica allows us to create some fields with some automatic calculations, we can enter in the estimate and see what it would be if it got approved later with a 7% increase. Thank you, Charlie. That's my slide. I'm not sure if you want to let it run again or not.
No, I'm going to go to that poll that are we doing monthly variance reportings? I'm going to launch it now, and then I'll follow it up with a second poll. So this first one is current year budget monitoring on a monthly basis. We still have our 71 attendees. Thank you very much, everyone, for hanging in there. And we'll give this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll and I'll share the results. Interesting. So 65% are doing monthly, 6% are considering it, and 29% said no. And that may be a form of the question. I would suspect maybe you're doing it quarterly or maybe even daily. So the question, I think, could have done that. But let's go to the next. I have another poll number now, a poll that we would like to say, are you presenting the results of this or decision packages to your elected officials? So I'm going to launch this poll. And these decision packages could be either, supplemental budget requests, they could be policy decisions, they could be actions that a city council might have to take because, or elected officials might have to take because of adverse budget monitoring. So let's launch this poll. The poll answers that are available to you are, we aren't presenting, we're having conversations with our elected officials, we're preparing financial reports, we have web-based presentation tools or Microsoft Office presentation tools. All right, we have a very active audience today. Thank you so much all for participating in our webinar with us. I'll give this 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's close the poll and I'll share the results. And the results show us that 66% are doing financial reports with 34% using Microsoft Office presentation tools. So that's typically what we find when we're polling our audiences, and So this is very interesting, and let's close this and move on to the next slide. Michael, anything in the poll results that you're seeing?
No, I just wanted to add though that you know, this issue of reforecasting is not simply a matter of reforecasting financials. It is often a matter of reforecasting, you know, statistical data that's you know, that drives the financials. You know, that while services definitely do have a financial consequences and so on, they don't. They're not things that sort of exist in a vacuum.
Right.
You know, people are doing real things. They're delivering real services. You know, they certainly have costs associated with them. But the numbers of those things that they're delivering and what they are is sort of just as important as the financial
Absolutely.
consequences.
Yeah, the numbers are the beginning of stories. And when I say stories, I mean narratives, informed narratives of what's really happening in the delivery of local government services. And there could be other factors that are affecting performance that could be economic in nature or, you know, environmental and community coming in. So yeah, all of that comes into play in our budget monitoring and our forecasting.
Gentlemen, Pauline has a question. She would like to know if the budget and forecast numbers entered into the tool integrate back into the ERP.
I can answer that. I mean, in our case, yes, we often are providing sort of updates back into the ERP. But I would say that for the most part, Questica Budget users, in the case of Questica Budget users, Questica Budget tends to be the system of record for the budget, and you know, the ERP becomes the system of record for actuals. You know, for real financial data.
Yeah. You know, another benefit I saw from this system of record is as we're putting those comments in, as you saw in an earlier slide, those comments then are saved within the system. So at the end of the year, when you're going through your annual financial audit and the auditor asks, well, why was there a variance of over 20% for this line item? Well, you've already captured that in your comment section and you don't have to relook it up at the end of the year. So, I mean, I could go on about how this tool, which is a budget and preparation and performance management tool, has a lot more uses and use cases.
One quick addition. It is pretty common for us to have integrations to export the adopted or approved budget back into the ERP system once it's been determined.
Yeah, Michael, so that's a nice question. Do people do their in the year budget management in the system and then re-export it back into the ERP? For example, supplemental budget appropriations.
Yes, yeah, we have a large number of clients who actually update the budget in their ERP based upon supplementary budgets that have been prepared in Questica Budget.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so let's really quickly go to the next few slides, and then we'll save time for questions. The first, this kind of operationally things that I did. You know, typically a fiscal impact section of a staff report that's presented to elected officials is usually what I saw most department heads would do is they go, is there an appropriation? In other words, is there authority to spend? And then they sometimes would say, here's the funding source. You know, it's coming from a special revenue fund, or perhaps there was a fee generated to pay for this service. If there's an adverse fiscal impact, you know, people would say, well, here's a new revenue, or it was unappropriated, but we're going to take it from fund balance. And then typically I would find that the fiscal impact section of the staff report would end there. Either there is a fiscal impact or there's no fiscal impact. Well, my city council wanted to know if what's the fiscal impact, not only on the current year budget, but they said, what does this do to our long-term financial plan? Is it consistent? Does it comport? Or does it collide with our long-term financial plan? And if it does collide, what's the impact on our strategic plan? Will we be able to meet our goals, our initiatives, or will that be affected? We want to know that before we make the right decision. So I would work that into the fiscal impact section of staff reports. Policy decisions. I mean, strategic planning gets real when you connect strategy to policy making. And so I think it's the highest level of policy formation is when you're developing these policies consistent with a strategic plan that has effective administration of the strategic plan, has ongoing evaluation, both financial and performance-wise on strategic initiatives, and regular communication. Once you have those three together, that forms into policy making. So, policy could be to move from 1 police officer per car to 2 officers per car in a certain district, patrolling district of the city. And then, how does that tie back into our financial projections? And then do those financial projections still permit us to meet the public safety goals and objectives that we have in there? So, Michael, you want to talk about a little bit of policy development, what you saw in your career and what you're seeing with our customers?
Sure. Let me just clear this thing off my thing. So we are seeing an increasingly large number of customers engaging with both their communities and with their elected officials in the development of policy. And Questica Budget is facilitating this by allowing the strategic plan and the budget to exist within the same framework and provide some, a tool for communication, which drives policy. Because as you said, communication is the most important thing in this whole policy development process. And it involves not just communication within the organization, but communication with the community.
Great. Yeah, so planning becomes a continuous exercise. There's regular updates based on what's happening now, which allows us to prepare roadmaps as well as develop scenarios quickly and easily that can be shared with the community. And one very important partnership that Questica has was with the firm called Balancing Act, which I believe CAGFO has presented to their audience before. And there you can actually look at scenarios and trade-offs and what the communities, how the community can participate in budget simulation exercises is really important to make these decisions for policies. And then finally, you get to the place where we have data to base the decisions. I remember back in the 70s or 80s when I first put in a program performance evaluation system. I did that because my city council used to say, "Oh, Mr. CFO, we have to make a political decision here because you're not giving us the evidence we need to make the informed decision." So, I started doing some of doing program analysis, performance reviews, fiscal and performance indicators, and I would start supporting their policy decisions with that. And I had one politician come up to me once and he goes, "Hey, Charlie, this is good, but I liked making the political decision." So, but once you start that process, it's hard to take it away. The citizens expect transparency and accountability. And technology is just playing a pivotal role today in helping us drive these data-based decisions. So we can have the evidence in front of us that supports the recommendations that we're making. So show us, Doug, an example of a council making policy decisions.
I'd be happy to. So here we can see a large number of those decision packages, which represent citizen requests, which city council members want to include in their budget. There's only so much leeway they have to insert their wish list. So it's important for them to be able to quickly compare one set of packages against another to make sure that they are balanced. So if we open up this package here in Questica Budget, we can see that the tool allows us to include additional information such as the city council voting record. Sorry, the video is running a little fast. we can also assign the decision package to be a member of a set of packages so that we can allow for comparisons between those sets. So once we have all those decision packages assigned to the correct set, we can now easily create an ad hoc report here so that we can compare the aggregated FTE requests, the revenues, and the expenses across all our sets of decision packages to determine which one we would like to approve. So
Okay,
just to let that run really quick here, these are the sets of decision packages shown here.
And Doug, these decision packages, they can be accepted or rejected individually as well as within blocks of categories?
Right, they all go through an approval process. So they're entered by an analyst, reviewed by a manager, and then approved by the central budget office. So that was the voting record information there. We have the set membership set there. And now we have an ad hoc view that's set up to help tie all that information together. And then we have an ad hoc report here, which shows just an aggregated view of one set against another. So we have the FTE and the expenses and the revenues there. And if we expand one of those sets, we can see which ones are part of that broader package. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah. All right. Well, in conclusion, let's just talk successful strategic planning. It requires a deliberative and a disciplined process. And fundamentally, strategic planning identifies your mission, your vision, and core values. And you use those as a foundation for specific, measurable, and achievable strategic action plans linked into the annual budget. Let's talk about why so many strategic plans fail. They lack commitment and persistence and follow through long after the planning is efficient. They have a tendency to be rolled out with a great deal of fanfare, but to sustain a strategic plan, you have to have a specific roadmap to take it beyond the banners and the desk toys until it is ingrained in the culture of the local government. And that's where I come back to the first slide of the role of the CFO and local government is to help cultivate the culture of strategic financial management, so that real steps, altered behavior, and hard work is applied and sustained to allow your strategic plan to come to life. So let's move on to, we saved some time for some questions. Lee, if you could monitor those questions for us, that would be great. And I would just like to thank the Canadian Association of Government Finance Officers for allowing Questica and our team to present to you today, to allow me to be here. And I just want to know that here's my contact information. If anyone has any follow-up requests, or you can send to info@questica.com to talk with either Michael or Doug. And any questions coming in, Lee?
Not so far, but I'll take that as an opportunity to thank you, Charlie, you, Mike, and you, Doug, for your very timely presentation today. It certainly struck me that we should not let inertia drive our budget processes. And of course, these days there seems to be nothing but inertia. And I think that's a very diplomatic way of saying that we live in some very strange times. The other thing that struck me is that the budget should always be aligned fully with our strategy. It's so important. So thank you both, all three of you, I should say, for that. I think you must have done such a wonderful job because I don't see any questions coming in. But the folks, of course, can always reach you at the email addresses you provided. And I'll thank you and our guests today for participating. And remind everyone you can sign up for our weekly Wednesday webinar on our website at cagfo.ca. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye,
Thank
Doug.
you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, women and men of
Thank you so
CAGFO.
much.
Yeah.